This is one of my favorite recipes my grandmother used to make in India. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put 3 tablespoons of olive oil, and we'll add a package of our curry mix. This curry mix is for 2 pounds of chicken. It gives you a medium heat level. But today I really like it a little spicier, so I'm going to add about half a package more of the curry mix right in there. And we're going to add our salt. So it's about 1.5 teaspoons of salt. And make a paste with this. It smells really good. And this then goes, we're going to add ground chicken. Mix that in thoroughly. You can use a spoon, or if you like, go right in there with your hands. Once this is completely marinated, just cover this up and put it in the refrigerator and let it sit for at least 2 hours. I sometimes like to leave it overnight, and it works really well. The spices go right into the meat and gives it an amazing flavor. And that little bit of oil really pushes that spice right into the meat as well. So the next thing we're going to do is we have grated 1 large onion. We do this because we want to remove some of the water from the onion. So gather all the grated onion, and of course you can do this with a hand grater or in the food processor, and just squeeze, and you can see how much water really comes out of the onion. This actually helps the meatball not to separate apart, but it still gives it that wonderful onion flavor. Add the cilantro in. We're just going to chop it up. Make sure that you chop up the stems as well. That's what gives it a lot of flavor and some body to it. Some of this is going to go in the ground meat, and we're going to keep a little bit for later for garnish as well. A couple tablespoons of this. We're going to mix this up, and I'm just going right inside and squishing it so that all the onions and the cilantro blends it evenly into the meat. The next thing is to make the meatballs. But before we do that, we're just going to make a mixture of cider vinegar water. Then wet your fingers with the water. What this does is it stops the meat from sticking to your fingers, and also when you're making the meatballs, they don't stick to each other. The other thing it also does is it gives it that nice little tang on the meatball as well. One can also make these into patties and make amazing hamburgers, and they're fabulous with some lettuce and mayo and mustard and tomato in there. It makes a lovely spicy chicken hamburger. We've made our meatballs, and now we saute some onions. So just going to chop up some onions here, and it's a large onion that we want to use. It makes a nice sauce when the meatballs cook in with the tomatoes. Now, the meatballs are great also for kebabs, because you can put the meatballs right onto skewers and put them on the barbecue, and they make amazing kebabs. Our next step is we're going to add some olive oil into a pan. We'll heat that up a little bit and add a large onion that we just chopped. And we want to saute this. And what we want to do is we don't want the onions to caramelize or become nice and dark. We just want them in a glassy state. And once they're in that glassy state, we will add the meatballs that we made. This looks pretty good. The onions are looking quite nice. Just spread the onions nice and flat on the pan. Bring your heat down to a really low heat and start adding the meatballs. And because we use the vinegar and water, as you can see, the meatballs don't stick to each other. And just gently put them down on top of the onions. And lowering the heat, it stops the onions from burning, and it will cook as it's going with the meatballs on top. Once you go around and you have covered most of the pan, you can always put some on top. That's not going to harm the meatballs, and they won't stick to each other. Do not stir this because the meat is still pretty raw. Once the chicken is cooked just on the outside, we can actually move it around and stir the chicken. Toss it in so that the onions come up to the top. So we're going to add the chopped tomatoes. Just put that right on top. And we're not wanting to stir any of this right now. And we'll add the 1.5 cups of tomato sauce. This gives it a nice thick sauce. We just want to cover that up and just let that sit till the tomatoes soften up. The tomatoes and the tomato sauce are now cooking quite nicely. We're going to add some water to it. Just give it more of a sauce, and just smell that. The spices have gone right into the tomato sauce and the meatballs, and just gives it a wonderful smell. So we're going to let this cook for 15 minutes on medium heat level, and as you can see, it's cooking quite nicely. Stir occasionally so that the meatballs do not stick to the bottom of the pan, and then let it cook until the tomatoes and the tomato sauce is completely cooked. So the chicken meatball curry is ready, and it smells fantastic. The sauce is all nice and thick, and you have this oneness of the curry. I love having this curry with basmati rice, just the way my grandmother used to serve us. And we're just going to put some of this delicious curry right on the rice. Because we clean, grind, and blend all of our spices from scratch, this is where you're going to see the difference, where the spices come right through. And the ancient recipes from my grandmother, my great-grandmother, that we use to make these blends. And that's what gives you the difference in the taste. Once you put that spoonful in your mouth, you just won't go back. On our website, we have 12 different curry mixes, a list of all the dealers that carry our product, and many recipes that you can enjoy. From my grandmother, my mother, and myself, we bring you these wonderful recipes, and we want you to enjoy them as we do in your kitchen, from our family to yours. Happy cooking!